This week, scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, announced that there is a greater than 99% chance that this year, 2024, will be the hottest year on record. It is a fitting backdrop as leaders from nearly 200 countries are meeting right now in Baku, Azerbaijan, at the United Nations Annual Summit on Climate Change, which is known as COP29. As has happened before, COP29 has been the target of protests and criticisms for lacking the urgency required to confront what is the most existential threat of our time. But this year, there is particular urgency given the election of Donald Trump, a man who not only has denied the existence of climate change, but also promised to reverse any and all progress that has been made to reduce fossil fuel emissions. Joining me now is David Wallace-Wells, an opinion writer at the New York Times and author of The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming. David, thanks for being here. This week, we learned that Trump's going to be appointing is aiming to appoint Doug Burgum, Secretary of the Interior, and the chairman of a newly formed National Energy Council, the focus of which is to increase oil and gas production in the United States. And he's appointing Lee Zeldin, who is a climate change skeptic, to head the EPA. I'm sure you have thoughts on both of these. Which do you think is potentially most damaging to the climate movement?
I think the EPA position is the bigger deal, but I think in the global picture, especially as we're dealing with COP, it's important just to note that what we're seeing right now is the abandonment of pretense to American leadership on climate the world over. Now, people looking around the world have looked at America with some skepticism. For years now, we are the biggest producer of oil and gas in the world. We're the biggest exporter of it too. But the reelection of Donald Trump has really sent a clear signal to people worried about climate everywhere around the globe that this fight is not going to be won with American leadership. And it's quite striking to me as someone who's been following this stuff for so long. If you had said to me 5 or 10 years ago that the clearest sign that China might have passed America and its imperial place in the world would be on climate, I would not have believed you. But I think that is where we are now.
What is can you elaborate more on that? The implications of America not being able, for the globe not being able to count on this, and China being the de facto leader in this fight?
Well, in terms of how fast the planet decarbonizes, I'm not sure it's ultimately all that consequential because we've started to unleash a program of rapid renewable rollout almost everywhere in the world over the last few years, and a lot of that will be done by market forces, whether or not policy follows. But to the extent that we were hoping for additional policy leverage to be placed on these issues, and in particular, to the extent that we were hoping that the global north would help the developing countries in the world decarbonize and adapt to the brutal world that they were going to be finding themselves living in short order, the evacuation of American leadership is really costly. It means that many more countries are going to feel like they're navigating this landscape on their own or forced to develop ad hoc relationships with other nations rather than working all together in the sort of the old global system that the U.S. used to preside over. As I said, I think, the transition is unfolding, but if we're hoping to accelerate it rather than just watch it continue at the same pace that it is on today, probably American leadership would be helpful there. And I don't think we're going to be getting it, at least for the next 4 years.
When you talk about market forces, it seems pretty clear that the market is intent to some degree on moving forward with green renewables and green energy. When you have the head of Exxon saying to Trump, don't withdraw from the Paris climate deal, and, other folks saying, look, the EVs are here to stay. Elon Musk is in the administration, effectively. He's a co-president. I mean, how optimistic are you that whatever Trump tries, the reality is that the green economy is in the United States and it's here to stay?
I think we're going to stay on something like the course that we had under the Biden administration, which is to say dramatic growth in renewables. A lot of that has actually been concentrated in red states, which means those gains are even more durable. But we're going to also continue to produce oil and gas at record levels. And ultimately, we're getting to a point with the climate crisis where that's where the rubber hits the road. We need to stop. At some point, we need to stop pulling it out of the ground and burning it, and we need to start finding ways to rely entirely, exclusively on green energy. And the U.S. is not in a place politically to force that development. And instead, we're doing all of the above, doing a lot of green stuff and doing a lot of dirty stuff too.
David Wallace-Wells, thank you for your time tonight. I really appreciate the thoughts and perspective on this one.